Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The scent of expensive cologne and cigar smoke always arrived before the men did. I learned that during my first week at Caviar and Crown, the kind of restaurant where a single bottle of wine cost more than my monthly rent. The kind of place where I didn't belong. Not really. Not as a guest, anyway. But as a server in a crisp white shirt and black slacks, I could slip between tables like a ghost, refilling crystal glasses and clearing gold-rimmed plates while remaining utterly invisible to the people who mattered. That particular Thursday night, the autumn rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into a blur of yellow taxi lights and dark umbrellas. My feet ached in my cheap flats. I'd been on them for 9 hours straight, covering someone else's shift because I needed the money. I always needed the money. Between my studio apartment in Queens, my mother's medical bills, and the student loans that followed me like shadows, I existed in a constant state of barely keeping my head above water. "Table 12 needs attention," Marcus, the floor manager, hissed as he passed me. His eyes flicked toward the corner booth, the one we kept reserved for special guests, the kind who didn't make reservations because they owned half the city. I grabbed a fresh bottle of Stolichnaya Elite from the bar, its glass cold against my palm, and made my way across the dining room. My reflection caught in the windows. Mousy brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, pale skin that hadn't seen real sunlight in weeks, dark circles under my green eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I looked exactly like what I was. Exhausted, invisible, forgettable. The booth came into view, and my breath caught. 4 men sat in the shadows, but only one commanded the space. He faced the door. Always the door, I would later learn. His back to the wall in a position of absolute control. Even seated, his presence filled the room like smoke, thick and suffocating. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, if I'd owned one. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, straight nose, lips that looked cruel even in repose. But it was his eyes that stopped me mid-step. Cold, calculating. The pale gray of winter ice, and just as unforgiving. 2 men flanked him like bookends. Security, obviously. Broad shoulders, dead eyes, hands that rested too casually near their jacket lapels. The 4th man, younger and nervous, sat across from the boss, sweating despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. I approached with the bottle, my service smile firmly in place. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I—" "Nakonets too," the boss said, not looking at me. Finally. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more dangerous. He spoke in rapid Russian to the nervous man, words I understood perfectly but wasn't supposed to. "Etot, idiot, dumayet, что я не знаю о его маленьких секретах." This idiot thinks I don't know about his little secrets. The nervous man's face went white. I stood frozen, the bottle growing warm in my grip. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Her bedtime stories told in the language of her homeland, the private world we'd shared before she died. I hadn't spoken Russian in years, not since I'd scattered her ashes in Brighton Beach. But I understood every word. "Pожалуйста," the nervous man whispered. "Please." The boss leaned forward slightly. The movement was minimal, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. "Ty ukral от меня. You stole from me. Ty znal pravila. You knew the rules. I should have moved. Should have poured the vodka and disappeared like I was trained to do, but something in the nervous man's expression, pure terror mixed with resignation, rooted me to the spot. "Mój syn," the nervous man began. "My son." "Tvoj syn?" The boss's laugh was soft, almost musical. "Teper ty dmeš o svoj semje?" "Your son. Now you think about your family?" He switched to English, his accent barely perceptible, refined by expensive education. "You had choices, Dmitri. You made the wrong ones." A barely perceptible nod from the boss, and one of the security men shifted. The movement was subtle, professional, but I saw the glint of something metallic beneath his jacket. My hand trembled. The bottle slipped. Glass exploded against the marble floor in a spectacular crash that seemed to echo through the entire restaurant. Premium vodka splashed across expensive Italian shoes, specifically, the boss's expensive Italian shoes. The sharp scent of alcohol mixed with my own spike of pure panic. The entire dining room fell silent. Every head turned toward us. Even the piano player stopped mid-note. "Oh my God," I gasped, dropping to my knees automatically, reaching for the shards with trembling fingers. "I'm so sorry, Nedvigatia." "Don't move." The command was quiet, but it sliced through the air like a blade. I froze, a piece of glass pressed against my palm, blood beginning to well from a cut I hadn't even felt. Slowly, I looked up. The boss was staring directly at me for the first time, those winter-gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. He studied my face the way someone might examine a painting in a museum. Careful, thorough, cataloging every detail, his head tilted slightly, like a predator that had just noticed something interesting about its prey. "Tai porazan," he said softly. "You're cut." The words hung in the air between us. He'd spoken in Russian again. A test? A trap? My mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to pretend I didn't understand, to play the dumb American waitress who'd just destroyed a $1,000 bottle of vodka. But something in his expression had changed. The coldness remained, but beneath it was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. "Yeah," I started, then caught myself. The Russian had come automatically, unbidden. "I am..." His eyes narrowed fractionally. "Продолжи." "Continue." Marcus appeared beside me, his face red with mortification. "Mr. Volkov, I am so terribly sorry. This will all be comped, of course, and she'll be... Leave us." The boss, Volkov, didn't look away from me. His voice remained soft, but Marcus retreated as if he'd been shoved. The two security men shifted closer. The nervous Dmitri had pressed himself back into the leather booth, forgotten in this new development. Volkov reached down, and I flinched instinctively, but his hand, large, warm, decorated with a platinum ring that caught the light, didn't strike. Instead, his fingers closed around my wrist, gentle but absolutely firm. He pulled my bleeding palm into view, examining the cut with the same intensity he'd used on my face. "Gluboko," he murmured, deep. Then, in English, "You need stitches." "I'm fine," I whispered, my heart hammered against my ribs. "It's nothing. I just need to..." "Tai ponimesh każdoje slovo, da?" He interrupted, still holding my wrist. "You understand every word, don't you?" The question wasn't really a question. The trap had already sprung shut. I just hadn't realized I'd stepped into it. I met his eyes. Probably the stupidest thing I'd ever done. "Da." "Yes." Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Satisfaction? It vanished too quickly to identify, replaced by that calculating coldness. But his thumb moved against my wrist, pressing against my racing pulse. Feeling it. Measuring it. Interesno. Interesting. He released my wrist and stood in one fluid motion. Up close, he was even more imposing. Easily 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, radiating the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. He buttoned his suit jacket with practiced precision. "Mikhail, get the car." One of the security men disappeared immediately. I started to protest, still kneeling in broken glass and vodka. Volkov looked down at me, and for just a moment, I saw something predatory flash in those gray eyes. A wolf that had just found something unexpected in its territory. "You're bleeding on my shoes," he said calmly. "And you speak my language." His head tilted again, that same assessing gesture. "We're going to talk about why you were eavesdropping on a private conversation. And why..." His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. "A little waitress from Queens who can barely afford her rent speaks fluent Russian." My blood ran cold. How did he know where I lived? How did he know anything about me? As if reading my thoughts, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You think I don't know everyone who works in my restaurant?" His restaurant. Oh God. Marcus reappeared with a first aid kit, his hands shaking as he tried to wrap my palm. Volkov made an impatient sound and took the gauze himself, his movements surprisingly gentle as he wound it around my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, absolutely controlled. "Sir, I can handle..." Marcus began. Go finish with Dmitri, Volkov said without looking up from my hand. The words were casual, but they carried the weight of a death sentence. I glanced at the nervous man still trapped in the booth. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and I saw my own fear reflected back at me. Don't, Volkov said quietly, drawing my attention back to him. Don't look at him. He made his choices. He finished wrapping my hand and stood, pulling me up with him. I stumbled slightly, lightheaded from blood loss or fear or both. His other hand caught my elbow, steadying me. You, however, you just made yours without even knowing it. The restaurant's front door opened, and I felt, rather than saw the man, Mikhail, return. Car's ready, boss. Volkov's hand remained on my elbow, his grip just firm enough to communicate that running would be pointless. He guided me toward the entrance, past tables full of Manhattan's elite, who were all very carefully not staring at us. I tried one last time, my voice barely a whisper. My shift, my manager. I can't just, you don't work here anymore, Volkov said simply. We reached the door, and he paused, looking down at me with those winter eyes. Rain pounded against the glass beside us, and in the reflection, I saw what we looked like. A powerful man in an expensive suit, and a terrified girl who'd just shattered her entire life along with that bottle of vodka. Почему ты боишься? He asked softly, switching back to Russian. Why are you afraid? Because you're dangerous, I wanted to say. Because I understood what you said to that man. Because I saw what was going to happen to him. And now I'm a witness to something I was never supposed to see. But what came out was, Я не хочу умереть. I don't want to die. For the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Not kindness. I would learn that Alexei Volkov was many things, but kind was not one of them. But perhaps interest. The way someone might look at a puzzle box they hadn't expected to find challenging. No, he said, still in Russian, his thumb brushing across the bandage on my palm. You're not going to die. He opened the door, and rain-soaked wind hit my face. A black Mercedes SUV sat at the curb, its windows tinted dark enough to hide anything, or anyone, inside. But your old life did, he continued, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me forward into the storm. The moment you understood my words and chose to stay listening instead of walking away, I stepped into the rain, my thin shirt soaking through immediately, and looked back at Caviar and Crown one last time. Through the window, I could see Marcus frantically gesturing to someone. See the other servers watching with wide eyes. See the booth in the corner where Dmitri sat alone now, his face in his hands. What happens to him? I asked, as Volkov opened the SUV door. He studied me for a long moment, rain running down his face without seeming to touch him. You want to save him? A man you don't know, who stole money meant for his son's surgery to gamble in Atlantic City? I hadn't known that, but it didn't change the fear in the man's eyes. Volkov made a sound that might have been approval or annoyance. Get in the car, Devochka, little girl. We'll discuss your unexpected compassion somewhere warmer. I looked at the open car door, at the dark interior that promised either salvation or destruction. Behind me, the restaurant glowed warm and safe. Inside that SUV, Mikhail waited with the kind of patience that came from having done this many times before. I could scream, I whispered. You could, Volkov agreed. But you won't. How do you know? His hand moved from my back to cup the side of my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. Because you're curious, he said. Because you've spent your whole life invisible, and for the first time, someone actually sees you. His eyes held mine, gray as smoke, as steel, as winter itself. And because you're smart enough to know that the only way Dmitri walks out of my restaurant alive is if you cooperate. The trap clicked shut with perfect precision. I stepped into the car. The leather seats were butter-soft and still warm, as if someone had just vacated them. Mikhail slid into the driver's seat without a word, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. Flat, assessing, already calculating the fastest way to dispose of my body if necessary. I'd seen that look before, in my neighborhood, in the faces of men who dealt in commodities more valuable than money, secrets, fear, control. Volkov settled beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, Something dark and expensive, woody with notes of bergamot, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine in the confined space. He didn't move away. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic, rain drumming against the bulletproof glass. I could feel it, the weight of the armoring, the way the vehicle moved differently than normal cars, heavier, protected, a fortress on wheels. Where are we going? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Somewhere private. Volkov pulled out his phone, one of 3 I could see in his jacket pocket, and typed something with quick, efficient movements. I don't discuss business in public. I'm not business. His eyes flicked to me, one eyebrow rising fractionally. No? Then what are you? A mistake. A witness. A girl who should have kept her mouth shut and her grandmother's language buried with her bones. Scared, I admitted. Good. He pocketed his phone and turned to face me fully, one arm draped across the back of the seat. His fingers played with a strand of hair that had escaped my bun, the gesture almost casual. Fear keeps you alert. Alert keeps you alive. We crossed the bridge toward Brooklyn, the city lights smearing across the rain-soaked windows like watercolor paint. My hand throbbed beneath the bandage, a steady pulse of pain that kept me grounded in reality. This was happening. This was real. Dmitri, I said suddenly, you said he could live if I cooperated. I said he could walk out of my restaurant alive. I kept my word. His fingers continued their lazy exploration of my hair. What happens to him after he walks out is another matter entirely. That's not fair. His laugh was soft, devoid of humor. Dmitri stole $70,000 from me, money that belonged to people who expect results. His son needed surgery, yes. Stage 4 neuroblastoma, very tragic. The surgery was already paid for, by me. His hand moved to the back of my neck, warm and possessive. He took the money I gave him for his dying child and gambled it away, lost it all in 3 nights, then tried to steal more to cover his tracks. My stomach churned. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You saw a scared man and assumed he was the victim. His thumb rubbed small circles at the base of my skull, a gesture that should have been soothing but felt like a claim of ownership. This is why you don't belong in my world, Maya. I froze. How do you know my name? Maya Catherine Volkov. He paused, watching my face. No relation, unless you're hiding more secrets. 26 years old, born in Brooklyn Methodist to Patricia Volkov and a father whose name isn't on your birth certificate. Raised by your mother and your babushka, Ekaterina, who died 3 years ago from complications of diabetes. Each word felt like a violation, like he was peeling back my skin to examine what lay beneath. You graduated NYU with honors. Art history, impractical but beautiful. Student debt, $83,000. You work 3 jobs, Caviar and Crown Thursday through Saturday, a coffee shop in Midtown Monday through Wednesday, and you clean offices on Sunday mornings. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. You haven't been on a date in 14 months. You take the F train home every night, get off at 23rd Street, and walk 3 blocks to your studio apartment where you live alone with a cat named Pushkin. Terror and rage warred in my chest. You had me investigated. I investigate everyone who works in my establishments. The fact that you're unremarkable is what made you remarkable. His hand moved to tilt my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. Until tonight, when you proved you could understand conversations you weren't meant to hear. That changes things. I won't tell anyone what I heard, I swear. I know you won't. His certainty was absolute, because you're smart enough to understand that the only thing keeping you safe right now is your value to me. I don't have any value to you. His smile was slow, dangerous. Don't you? A girl who speaks perfect Russian, who can move through high-end establishments without drawing attention, who's desperate enough for money that she works herself to exhaustion? His thumb traced my lower lip. I can think of several uses for someone like you. The SUV turned down a quiet street in Dumbo, pulling into an underground garage beneath a converted warehouse. The building was all exposed brick and massive windows, the kind of industrial chic renovation that sold for millions. Security cameras tracked our movement. A man in a black suit stood by the elevator, speaking quietly into a radio. Out, Volkov said, releasing me and opening his door in one fluid motion. My legs trembled as I climbed out of the SUV. The garage was pristine, holding a collection of vehicles that together probably cost more than my neighborhood. A Bentley, a Porsche, another Mercedes, and what looked like a vintage Rolls-Royce. Everything black, everything deadly elegant. Mikhail remained by the car while Volkov guided me toward the elevator with that same possessive hand on my lower back. The security guard nodded respectfully, deferentially, and stepped aside. "Sir," Yuri called, "the shipment is later." Volkov's tone allowed no argument. The elevator doors closed on us, sealing me into another confined space, with a man who seemed to take up all the available oxygen. We rose in silence. I watched the numbers climb, 12 floors, each one taking me further from any possibility of escape. The elevator was mirrored, and I caught our reflection. Him, immaculate and powerful in his designer suit. Me, bedraggled and small, my white shirt transparent from the rain. Dark circles under my eyes like bruises. "Why Russian?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "Why do you speak Russian? It's not common. Not in your generation. Not outside Brighton Beach." I swallowed hard. "My grandmother. She raised me while my mother worked. She only spoke Russian at home. Said I needed to know where I came from." "And where is that?" "Smolensk. She left during the Soviet collapse. Met my grandfather in New York. He was already here, working construction. He died before I was born." His expression shifted slightly, something almost like recognition. "Smolensk. My mother was from Smolensk." The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal a penthouse that looked like it had been designed by someone with unlimited funds and very specific taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Manhattan skyline, rain streaking down the glass like tears. The furniture was minimal, leather, chrome, dark wood, and everything was positioned with mathematical precision. A space designed for control, not comfort. 2 more security guards stood inside, both armed. They nodded to Volkov and ignored me completely. "Leave us," Volkov said, shrugging out of his wet jacket. One of the guards took it and disappeared. We were alone. He crossed to a bar in the corner, poured 2 glasses of vodka, not the premium stuff from the restaurant, but something in a bottle with Cyrillic labels I recognized as real Russian import. He handed me one and gestured to a leather couch positioned to face the windows. "Sit." I remained standing. "I want to go home." "Not yet." He took a measured sip, watching me over the rim of his glass. "First, we establish some rules. I don't work for you. You do now." He set his glass down and moved closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You have a choice, Maya. You can work for me willingly and be compensated well for your time and discretion, or you can refuse, and I'll find other ways to ensure your silence." "You mean kill me? Death is so permanent, so wasteful." His hand came up to cup my face again, that same gentle touch that belied the threat in his words. "I prefer mutually beneficial arrangements. You need money. I need someone I can trust to move through certain spaces without drawing attention. Someone who can listen, observe, report back to me in a language most of my enemies don't bother learning anymore. A spy. An asset." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "I'll pay off your student loans, cover your mother's medical expenses, triple what you make now for half the work." The offer was staggering, impossible, too good to be true. "And if I say no?" His expression didn't change, but something cold slithered through his eyes. "Then you become a liability, and I don't keep liabilities around." My hand shook, vodka sloshing in the glass. "That's not a choice." "No," he agreed, "it's not. But I'm giving you the illusion of one, which is more than most people in your position receive." I took a desperate sip of vodka, the liquid burning down my throat. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Be smart, Maishka. In this world, you survive by knowing when to bend and when to break." What would I have to do? Satisfaction flickered across his face. "Attend certain events with me, high-end charity galas, restaurant openings, gallery showings, places where wealthy people gather and speak freely around the hired help. You'll watch, listen, and tell me everything you hear. That's it?" "That's it." He took the glass from my hand and set it aside, then captured both my wrists in his hands. His grip was gentle, but I could feel the strength coiled beneath it, the promise that he could hurt me if he chose. But there are rules. You don't speak of what you hear or see. Not to friends, family, the police. No one. You don't ask questions about my business beyond what's necessary for your tasks. And his voice dropped lower, more intimate. You belong to me, under my protection, which means no other men. No dates, no relationships, nothing that could compromise your position or create divided loyalties. You're insane. I'm careful. He pulled me closer, eliminating the space between us. His body was solid, warm, radiating power. People who work for me are valuable. People who work for me and can be manipulated through romantic attachments are liabilities. You're not going to what? Fall for the man who's offering you financial freedom. Who sees you when the rest of the world looks through you? His hand slid up to cradle the back of my head. I'm not asking you to love me, Maya. I'm asking you to be smart. His other hand moved to my waist, pulling me flush against him. I could feel every hard plane of his body, the steady beat of his heart, the heat of him soaking through my wet clothes. Why me? I whispered. You could have anyone. Why does it have to be? Because you're invisible, he said simply. Beautiful in a way people don't notice until they really look. Educated enough to move in elite circles, but desperate enough to need what I'm offering. And his fingers tightened in my hair. Because you remind me of someone I lost. The admission surprised us both. His jaw tightened, as if he'd revealed more than intended. Who? That's not your concern. He released me abruptly and stepped back, his mask of control sliding back into place. You have until Monday to decide. I'll have Mikhail drive you home. You'll find your student loan account paid off by morning. Consider it a signing bonus whether you accept or not. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Why would you pay my loans if I haven't agreed? Because now you owe me regardless of your decision. And because... He picked up his phone, already moving on to the next thing, dismissing me. I want you thinking about what your life could be with my resources behind you. The elevator dinged. Mikhail had returned, standing silently by the open doors. Go home, Maya. Volkov didn't look up from his phone. Feed your cat. Sleep. Think about whether you want to spend the rest of your life exhausting yourself for scraps, or if you're brave enough to accept what I'm offering. I walked toward the elevator on numb legs. At the threshold, I turned back. He was watching me, phone forgotten, those winter gray eyes tracking my every movement. Dmitri, I said quietly. What happens to him? He has until tomorrow to return what he stole. If he manages that miracle, his son keeps his father. His head tilted. Does that satisfy your conscience? It didn't. But it was more mercy than I'd expected. The elevator doors closed, and I sagged against the mirrored wall, my reflection staring back at me with wild eyes and rain-soaked hair. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Don't come back, you're fired. Then another notification. My banking app. I opened it with shaking fingers. Student loan balance, $0 A text from an unknown number. Sweet dreams, Meshka. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll send a car. A V. The elevator descended, carrying me back down to earth, but I knew with absolute certainty that I was already falling into something far more dangerous than gravity. I didn't sleep. How could I, when my entire world had been dismantled and reconstructed in the span of 3 hours? I sat on my threadbare couch with Pushkin purring in my lap, staring at my phone screen as if the numbers might change back, as if the zero balance might reveal itself as a hallucination brought on by stress and blood loss. But Saturday morning light filtered through my dusty window, and the balance remained 0.00, $83,000. Gone. Just like that. My mother called at 8, her voice thin and tired from the overnight shift at the nursing home where she'd worked for 20 years. Masha, you sound strange. Are you sick? She was the only one who still called me by my Russian name. Everyone else used Maya, easier, more American, less likely to mark me as other. I'm fine, Mama, just tired. You work too much, like your babushka, always working. A pause, then softer. I got a call from the billing department at Mount Sinai. They said my account is paid in full. Did you... Masha, please tell me you didn't do something foolish. My throat constricted. The medical bills. Nearly $40,000 for her diabetes treatment. The complications. The hospital stays. I'd been paying them down at $200 a month, watching the interest accumulate faster than I could chip away at it. No, Mama, I didn't do anything foolish. Liar. Then how... I'll explain later. I have to go. I hung up before she could press further, before the weight of what I'd agreed to, what I was going to agree to, because we both knew I had no real choice, crushed the air from my lungs. The weekend passed in a blur of impossible stillness. I called in sick to the coffee shop, ignored Marcus's increasingly angry texts about the uniform I hadn't returned, and existed in a state of suspended animation. Saturday night, I searched Alexei Volkov's name on my laptop. The results were terrifyingly sparse. A few society page photos, him in a tuxedo at charity events, always with a different beautiful woman on his arm, never smiling. An article about his import-export business that had made him a fortune. Nothing about the Russian mob, nothing about violence or crime or the cold calculation I'd seen in his eyes. But the absence of information was more telling than any exposé could have been. Men like Volkov didn't accumulate that kind of power by being careless enough to leave evidence. Sunday morning, I cleaned my apartment with manic energy, scrubbing tiles that were already clean, organizing closets that held almost nothing. Anything to avoid thinking about tomorrow. About the car that would arrive at 9, and the choice I'd already made the moment I stepped into his SUV. My phone buzzed at noon. Unknown number. Wear something simple but elegant. You're accompanying me to a gallery opening. AV. My hands shook as I typed back. I haven't said yes. His response was immediate. Your mother's medical bills say otherwise. The car will be there at 8 p.m. I threw my phone across the room, watching it bounce off the couch cushions. Pushkin yowled and fled to the bedroom. He was right. God help me. He was right. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of more rain. I dressed in the only outfit I owned that might qualify as elegant, a simple black dress I'd bought for my grandmother's funeral, paired with the same tired flats I wore to every job. My reflection in the mirror looked haunted. Pale skin, hollow eyes, hair that I'd tried and failed to style into something sophisticated. I looked like exactly what I was. A girl playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong to. The car arrived at 8:55. Not the SUV from Thursday night, but a sleek black sedan with windows tinted so dark they looked like holes in reality. The driver was a different man, older, with salt and pepper hair, and eyes that had seen too much. Miss Volkov, he said, opening the rear door. I'm Victor. I'll be your primary driver. I'm not. I started to correct him, then stopped. Not his Volkov. Not yet. But the claim had already been staked. The brand already applied. The drive to Dumbo was silent. Victor didn't attempt conversation, didn't even glance at me in the rearview mirror. We pulled into the same underground garage, but this time he escorted me to a different elevator, one that required a keycard to access. Mr. Volkov is expecting you in his office, 12th floor. The elevator opened directly into a space that made the penthouse seem warm by comparison. Glass walls divided the floor into sections. One corner held a conference room where 3 men in suits were having an intense discussion. Another contained rows of monitors displaying security footage from what looked like a dozen different locations. And at the far end, behind floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the East River, sat Alexei Volkov. He didn't look up as I approached, his attention focused on papers spread across his massive desk. In the morning light, he looked younger, mid-30s maybe, and somehow more dangerous. The expensive suit had been replaced by slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories I didn't want to know. You're early, he said without looking up. Eager? Or anxious? Terrified. That made him glance up. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Approval, maybe. Good. That will keep you sharp. He stood and circled the desk, and I was reminded again of how he moved. Economical, precise, like everything he did was calculated 3 steps ahead. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back. "Let me see your hand." I held out my bandaged palm. He unwrapped it carefully, examining the cut with the same focus he'd given his paperwork. The wound had scabbed over, angry and red, but healing. "It'll scar," he said matter-of-factly. "I have others." His eyes met mine. "Show me." "What?" "Your other scars. Show me." Heat crawled up my neck. "Why?" "Because I need to know what I'm working with, because scars tell stories, and I want to know yours." His hand caught my wrist. "Show me, Maya." The use of my name, not Maishka, not Miss Volkov, but Maya, somehow made it more intimate, more dangerous. With my free hand, I pushed up my left sleeve, revealing the pale line along my forearm. Broke my arm when I was climbing the fire escape to get away from... I stopped. From? My mother's boyfriend. He drank. The words came out flat, emotionless. Old wounds I'd long since stopped feeling. Babushka took care of me after that. He left. Volkov's thumb traced the scar, his touch feather-light. More. I turned my wrist, showing him the burn mark near my thumb. Grease fire at my first restaurant job. I was 16. More. There's a C-section scar on my abdomen, I said quietly. From when I was 22, I was pregnant. The baby. My voice cracked. She didn't make it. Placental abruption at 32 weeks. His hand tightened on my wrist, the only sign he'd heard something that mattered. The father? Gone before I even knew I was pregnant. One night stand with a grad student who made it clear I was a mistake. I pulled my hand back, wrapping my arms around myself. Can we not do this? No, I told you. I need to know who you are. He moved to a leather armchair by the window and gestured for me to sit in the matching one across from him. You've lost a child. That changes a person. It made me careful. It made you afraid. Not an accusation, just an observation. You stopped taking risks, stopped living, started just surviving. He wasn't wrong. After Lily, I'd named her even though she never breathed. I'd retreated into the safety of routine. Work, sleep, work again. No friends who might ask questions. No relationships that might lead to more loss. Just existence, grinding and gray. Why do you care? I asked. Because fear is useful, but it can also be a weakness. I need to know which one applies to you. He leaned back, studying me. Tell me about your grandmother. The shift in topic threw me. What about her? You speak Russian because of her. You loved her. What else? I swallowed hard. She was fierce. Survived Stalin's purges, the collapse, immigration. She worked in a factory here for 30 years, raised me when my mother couldn't, and never complained. Not once. My voice softened. She used to tell me stories, fairy tales from the old country, but darker, real. About girls who survived by being clever instead of just beautiful. Like Vasilisa the Wise, I looked up, surprised. You know the tale? My mother told it to me. The girl who outwitted Baba Yaga and claimed her own power. His lips curved slightly. I always preferred it to the ones where the princess just waited to be rescued. For a moment, something almost human passed between us. A recognition of shared history, shared culture. Then his phone buzzed, and the moment shattered. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. Dmitri is dead. My stomach dropped. What? They found him in the Hudson this morning. Bullet through the head. He said it with the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. He didn't come up with the money, but you said... I said he had until tomorrow to return what he stole. He chose to run instead. Volkov pocketed his phone and stood. This is the world you've entered, Maya. Actions have consequences. Mercy has limits. I felt sick. I could have... What? Saved him? He moved to stand in front of me, his hand cupping my chin and forcing me to meet his eyes. You're not a savior. You're not even particularly powerful. You're a girl who happened to understand the wrong conversation at the wrong time, and now you're mine. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes. I'm not yours. No? His thumb traced my lower lip. Then walk away. Right now. Walk out that door, and I'll let you go. It should have been easy. It should have been automatic. Run from the monster, save yourself, survive. But my mother's medical bills were paid. My student loans were gone. And Victor was waiting downstairs to drive me to a life where I didn't have to count every dollar, every meal, every moment. I can't, I whispered. I know. He released me and checked his watch. Tonight, we attend the gallery opening. You'll wear the dress I had delivered to your apartment. What dress? Check your closet when you get home. It will fit. He said it with absolute certainty. You'll stay by my side, smile appropriately, and listen to everything said around us. Tomorrow, you'll report back what you heard. We'll do this twice a week until you're comfortable in those spaces, until people stop seeing you as remarkable and start seeing you as furniture again. And if I hear something bad, something illegal, then you tell me, and I handle it. His expression turned cold. You don't go to the police. You don't play hero. You survive, Maya. That's all I require. A knock on the glass wall. One of the men from the conference room stood there, his face impassive. Volkov nodded, and the man entered. Sir, the shipment from Brighton Beach is ready for inspection. I'll be down in 10 minutes. Volkov turned back to me. Victor will take you home. Rest. Eat something. You look half-starved. The car will pick you up at 7. I stood on shaking legs. Why are you doing this? Really? There has to be easier ways to get information. He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than I'd heard it. You remind me of my sister, Katya. She spoke Russian the way you do, with that same Smolensk accent. That same mixture of strength and fragility. His jaw tightened. She died 3 years ago, killed by men who thought she was just a pretty face, not a threat. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be, just stay alive. He moved to his desk, dismissing me. And Maya, wear your hair down tonight. You hide behind that severe bun. Stop hiding. The elevator doors closed on his office, on the world I was stepping into, and I realized with crystalline clarity that I'd just sold my soul to a devil who looked at me and saw a ghost. The dress was waiting for me when I got home, draped across my bed like a promise or a threat. Deep emerald green silk that caught the light and shimmered like water. Simple in design, sleeveless, fitted bodice, a skirt that would fall just below my knees, but unmistakably expensive. The kind of garment that cost more than 3 months of my old rent. A pair of heels sat beside it, black and elegant, exactly my size. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known my measurements, my shoe size, even the shade of green that would complement my pale skin and dark hair. I touched the fabric with trembling fingers. It felt like surrender. Pushkin wound between my legs, meowing plaintively. I'd forgotten to feed him, forgotten everything except the weight of Volkov's words. You're mine. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to eat, managed half a sandwich before my stomach revolted, tried to read, stared at the same page for 20 minutes without absorbing a single word. Finally, I gave up and stepped into the shower, letting scalding water pound against my skin until it turned pink. At 6:30, I began the transformation, hair washed and dried, falling in soft waves around my shoulders instead of scraped back into submission. Minimal makeup. I'd never learned to do more, just mascara and a touch of lipstick I'd bought years ago and never worn. The dress slid over my body like a second skin, fitting perfectly, impossibly. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked elegant, sophisticated, like she belonged in Volkov's world of bulletproof cars and underground garages. But her eyes, my eyes, held the truth. Terrified. Trapped. You remind me of my sister, the words echoed as I slipped into the heels. Was that all I was to him? A replacement for a ghost? A living doll to dress up and parade around while he grieved someone he'd lost? Victor arrived at 7 exactly. His expression didn't change when he saw me, but he held the car door open a fraction longer than necessary. You look well, Miss Volkov. Maya, I said automatically. Please, just Maya. Mr. Volkov prefers... I don't care what he prefers. The words came out sharper than intended. My name is Maya. Victor's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. As you wish, Maya. The gallery was in Chelsea, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and walls of exposed brick. We pulled up to a red carpet, an actual red carpet, where photographers clustered like vultures, flashbulbs already popping. Panic seized my chest. I can't. You can. Victor's voice was surprisingly gentle. Mr. Volkov is already inside. Head down. Move quickly. They're not here for you. He was right. The photographers barely glanced at me as I hurried past, their attention focused on an actress I vaguely recognized from billboards. Inside, the gallery pulsed with conversation and champagne, the beautiful people of Manhattan dressed in their carefully curated armor of designer labels and strategic accessories. And there, in the center of it all, like a gravitational force, stood Alexei Volkov. He wore a tuxedo that had been tailored to perfection, the jacket emphasizing his broad shoulders, the crisp white shirt, a stark contrast against his olive skin. His dark hair was swept back, and those winter-gray eyes scanned the room with predatory awareness. Two men flanked him, not Mikhail, but others cut from the same cloth. Security disguised as companions. Then his gaze found me, and everything else ceased to exist. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched as I crossed the gallery floor toward him, his expression unreadable but his attention absolute. People parted instinctively, sensing something in the air they couldn't quite name. Maya. He said my name like a prayer or a curse. His hand extended, and when I took it, he pulled me close, his other hand settling possessively on my waist. You wore your hair down. You told me to. I gave you many instructions. I'm pleased you chose to follow this one. His thumb traced small circles on my hip through the silk. You look beautiful. Dangerous. Dangerous? Beautiful women always are. He guided me through the crowd, nodding to people I didn't recognize, murmuring greetings in English and Russian and what sounded like Italian, but he never released my waist, never let more than an inch of space exist between us. We stopped in front of an enormous canvas, abstract splashes of red and black that might have been blood and shadows, or roses and midnight. The placard beside it read, Confinement, by Sasha Kuznetsov. Price, $250,000. Do you like it? Volkov asked, his breath warm against my ear. It's angry. Yes. His hand tightened on my waist. Sasha painted this in prison, 6 years in a Siberian gulag for insulting the wrong official. He learned to channel rage into beauty. You knew him? I got him out. Called in favors, paid bribes, made threats. He paints for me now, and I make sure he stays free. His eyes remained on the canvas. Everyone in this room thinks they're free, Maya. But they're all in cages of one kind or another. Money, reputation, fear. The bars just look different. Before I could respond, a woman appeared beside us, 50s, dripping in diamonds, her face pulled tight from too many surgeries. Alexei, darling, I didn't know you'd be here. Katerina. He kissed her cheeks in the European fashion. Lovely to see you. Maya, this is Katerina Romanov. She runs the Children's Hospital Foundation. Katerina, my companion, Maya Volkov. The woman's eyes sharpened on me. Volkov? Are you? No relation, Volkov said smoothly. Common name. But Maya shares my interest in art. Katerina's smile didn't reach her eyes. How coincidental. She turned her attention back to Volkov, effectively dismissing me. I wanted to discuss the gala next month. We're hoping for another generous contribution. Of course. Have your people contact mine. His hand never left my waist. If you'll excuse us, I promised Maya a tour. He guided me away, before Katerina could respond, moving through the gallery with purpose. People called out to him. Greetings, invitations, barely disguised attempts to secure his attention, but he acknowledged them with minimal courtesy and kept walking. You're important here, I observed. Money makes you important. Fear makes you untouchable. We stopped in a quieter corner, away from the main crowd. Listen. The man by the bar in the navy suit, that's Markus Petrov. He owns a shipping company that's losing money. He's desperate. The woman in red beside him is his wife, who doesn't know he's been skimming from their joint accounts to pay gambling debts. I glanced over. The couple looked perfect, beautiful, wealthy, smiling. How do you know that? Because I pay attention. Because information is more valuable than money. His hand moved to the small of my back. Watch them. Listen. Tell me what you notice. For the next hour, we moved through the gallery like dancers in an elaborate performance. Volkov introduced me to bankers and politicians, artists and socialites, each conversation a carefully choreographed exchange, and I listened. I heard the banker mention offshore accounts in a tone that suggested illegality. Heard the politician's wife complain about that bitch from the Times who was asking too many questions about campaign contributions. Heard two men in corner discuss the shipment from Odessa, with nervous glances over their shoulders. And through it all, Volkov's hand never left my body. Waist, lower back, once brushing against my neck in a gesture that made several women glare at me with open hostility. "They think I'm your mistress," I whispered as we moved toward the exit. "Let them think what they want." He guided me outside, where Victor was already waiting with the car. "You did well tonight. I just listened." "Exactly." We slid into the back seat, and Volkov pulled out his phone, typing notes with rapid efficiency. "The banker, Mitchell Grayson, he's about to be investigated by the SEC. The politician's wife was right to be worried about the Times reporter. And those men discussing Odessa are moving stolen art." "How do you know all this?" "Because I make it my business to know." He pocketed his phone and turned to face me fully. "You heard things tonight that could destroy careers, end marriages, put people in prison. That's your value, Maya. You're invisible enough that people talk freely around you, but observant enough to catch what matters. I don't want to destroy anyone. You won't. I will." His hand cupped my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. "You're just the messenger. The weapon I wield is information, not innocence." The car pulled up to my building, shabby and worn compared to the gleaming towers of Manhattan. Volkov stared at it with distaste. "This isn't safe. It's what I can afford. Not anymore." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Lease agreement for an apartment in Brooklyn Heights. 2 bedrooms, secure building, doorman. Your name is already on it. You move in this weekend." I stared at the envelope like it might bite. "I can't accept that." "You can, and you will. I'm not having my asset living in a building with broken locks and no security." His tone brooked no argument. "Victor will help you pack on Saturday. The apartment is furnished." "You're controlling my entire life." "Yes." No apology, no justification, just flat acknowledgement. "That's the arrangement, Maya. I provide for you, protect you, and in return, you belong to me. Exclusively. I'm not a possession. Aren't you?" His hand moved to my neck, fingers curling gently around my throat. Not squeezing, just holding. A reminder of how easily he could hurt me if he chose. "Your education. Paid for. Your home. Provided. Your safety. Guaranteed. Everything you have, everything you are now, exists because I allow it." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "No, you don't. I hate you. You hate that I'm right." He released my throat and opened the car door. "Go inside. Tomorrow at noon I'll send a car. We'll have lunch and you'll tell me everything you noticed tonight that I didn't mention." I climbed out on shaking legs. "And if I refuse? If I just don't get in the car tomorrow?" He leaned forward, his face half-shadowed, those gray eyes gleaming like a wolf's in darkness. "Then I'll come get you myself. And I won't be gentle about it." The door closed. The car pulled away, and I stood on the sidewalk in my beautiful dress and borrowed heels, watching my cage transform from bars to silk. Tuesday morning, I called my mother. "Masha, I've been so worried. You haven't answered my calls." "I'm fine, Mama. I got a new job. Better pay. I'm moving to a better apartment." Silence. Then, carefully, "What kind of job?" "Assistant work, for a businessman." The lie tasted like ash. "It's legitimate, I promise, Masha." "I have to go." "I'll call you this weekend." I hung up before she could press further, before the weight of what I'd become crushed the air from my lungs. At noon exactly, Victor appeared at my door, not with the car, in person, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Volkov is waiting at Per se. Traffic is heavy. We should leave now. Per se. I'd heard of it. One of the most expensive restaurants in New York. The kind of place where reservations were made months in advance. I'm not dressed for... You're dressed fine. His eyes softened slightly. He's not trying to impress you, Maya. He's trying to feed you. You barely ate anything last night. The observation caught me off guard. You were watching? I'm always watching. It's my job. He gestured toward the door. Please. He gets impatient when kept waiting. The restaurant was everything I'd imagined. Hushed elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, tables spaced far enough apart that conversations remained private. Volkov sat at a corner table, his back to the wall as always, speaking quietly into one of his phones. He looked up as I approached, and something in his expression shifted. Softened. Just fractionally. Maya. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him and ended his call. You look tired. I didn't sleep. Neither did I. He poured water from a crystal pitcher, his movements precise. I was thinking about what you said last night, that you hate me. I do. Good. Hate keeps you sharp. Complacent people make mistakes. He leaned back as a waiter appeared, ordering in French without consulting a menu. When the waiter left, Volkov's attention fixed on me with laser focus. Tell me what you noticed last night that I didn't mention. I took a breath and began reciting details I'd catalogued. The woman in the corner who'd been crying in the bathroom, mascara smudged, whispering into her phone about the test results. The young man who'd been watching Volkov all night with barely concealed hatred. The security guard who'd been sleeping on the job, head nodding by the fire exit. Volkov listened without interrupting, his expression growing more approving with each observation. Excellent. The woman, Irina Sokolov, wife of my competitor. She's pregnant, but not with her husband's child. The young man, Dmitri's son, actually. He blames me for his father's death. His jaw tightened. And the security guard will be fired by tonight. Dmitri's son was there? Yes. Anton, 23, medical student, suddenly fatherless. Volkov's expression was unreadable. He's right to blame me. I killed his father. The casual admission made my stomach churn. I said Dmitri was found in the Hudson. I didn't say who put him there. He took a measured sip of water. I pulled the trigger myself, Maya, because he stole from me, and I have to maintain order. That's how this world works. Food arrived. Course after exquisite course that I barely tasted. Volkov ate methodically, watching me struggle with each bite, and I realized this was another test. Could I sit across from a murderer and break bread? Could I swallow food while processing the fact that the hands cutting his steak had ended a man's life? Why did you tell me? I finally asked. You could have let me believe someone else. Because I don't lie to my people. I'm a monster, Maya. I've done terrible things for power, for money, for revenge, but I'm an honest monster. He set down his fork. And because I need you to understand exactly who you're working for. What you're complicit in now. Complicit. The word hung between us like smoke. I want out, I whispered. No, you don't. You want the fantasy of being innocent while enjoying the benefits of my protection. His hand reached across the table, capturing mine. But that's not how this works. You're in now, Maya, all the way in. And the only way out is death, yours or mine. His thumb stroked across my knuckles, a gesture that should have been tender but felt like a shackle. I have a job for you this weekend, he continued. Charity gala at the Met. You'll wear another dress I provide, stay at my side, and listen. Specifically, I need to know if Senator Morrison's wife mentions anything about her husband's investigation into port security. You want me to spy on a senator's wife? I want you to listen to conversations that happen around you. What she chooses to say in public is her problem, not yours. He released my hand and signaled for the check. Saturday, 7 p.m. Victor will collect you from your new apartment, which you'll move into Friday. I haven't agreed to move. Yes, you have. He stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced precision. You agreed the moment you took my money, wore my dress, and sat across from me without running. Stop pretending you have choices, Maya. It's beneath both of us. He left cash on the table, far more than necessary, and guided me toward the exit with that possessive hand on my lower back. Outside, rain had started again, the sky gray and heavy. Victor waited with an umbrella, shielding us from the weather as we walked to the car. "I'll see you Saturday," Volkov said, opening the door for me himself. "And Maya?" He leaned close, his lips brushing my ear. "Stop fighting what you're becoming. It will hurt less." The door closed. The car pulled away, and I sat in the back seat, watching the city blur past, wondering how many pieces of my soul I'd sold and how many I had left to give. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Victor and 2 other men I didn't recognize appeared at my apartment at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying boxes and packing materials. They moved through my tiny space with efficient silence, wrapping my meager possessions like they were precious artifacts instead of thrift store furniture and secondhand books. "The new apartment is fully furnished," Victor said, as I stood uselessly in the center of the chaos. "You only need personal items, clothes, photographs, anything with sentimental value." I watched them pack my life into 6 boxes. 6 boxes for 26 years of existence. It should have been depressing, but instead I felt oddly liberated, as if the physical evidence of my poverty was being erased, replaced by something sleeker and more acceptable. The apartment in Brooklyn Heights was everything my studio wasn't. Spacious, modern, flooded with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the East River. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. 2 bedrooms, one with a king-sized bed dressed in white linens, the other set up as an office with a desk and bookshelves. And in the closet of the master bedroom, an entire wardrobe waited. Dresses, slacks, blouses, shoes, all in my size, all in colors that would complement my complexion. A collection of someone else's vision of who I should be. "Mr. Volkov had these selected by a personal stylist," Victor said, watching me stare at the clothes. "For events you'll attend with him." "How many events?" "As many as necessary." He handed me a new phone, sleek, expensive, already programmed with contacts. "Your old number has been transferred. Mr. Volkov's private line is listed under AV. You call that number if there's an emergency. Only that number." I turned the phone over in my hands. Another leash. Beautifully disguised, Victor left me alone to settle in, which meant I wandered through rooms that smelled of new paint and expensive candles, touching surfaces that had never known poverty or struggle. Pushkin explored cautiously, his tail puffed with suspicion. My phone buzzed. "AV? Comfortable?" I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "It's a beautiful cage." His reply was immediate. "All cages are beautiful if you stop fighting the bars. Rest today. Tomorrow changes everything." I didn't ask what he meant. I was learning that Volkov spoke in riddles and revelations, never giving more information than absolutely necessary. Saturday evening, I dressed in the gown he'd selected. Midnight blue silk that hugged every curve, with a neckline that dipped low enough to be daring without crossing into inappropriate. Diamond earrings waited in a velvet box on my dresser, along with a note in precise handwriting. "Borrowed, not given. Don't lose them." AV Victor arrived at 6:30, his expression carefully neutral as he took in my appearance. "You look like you belong," he said, and I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a warning. The Met was transformed for the gala. Red carpets, ice sculptures, champagne fountains, women in couture gowns floated past on the arms of men in tuxedos, everyone playing their part in Manhattan's eternal theater of wealth and influence. Volkov waited at the top of the stairs, and when he saw me, something flickered across his face, hunger, possession, something darker I couldn't name. He descended the steps with predatory grace and took my hand, raising it to his lips. "Prekrasna," he murmured against my knuckles. "Beautiful. You're staring." I'm admiring my investment. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me flush against him. "Every man in this room is going to wonder who you are and how I found you. Let them wonder." We entered together, and I felt the shift in attention, the subtle turns of heads, the whispered conversations behind champagne flutes. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was marked as his, and that made me visible in ways I'd never experienced. Senator Morrison and his wife held court near the classical sculpture gallery. The senator was silver-haired and charismatic, working the room with practiced ease. His wife, Diane, was 15 years younger, blonde, beautiful, and brittle around the edges, in the way of women who'd traded beauty for security and weren't sure they'd gotten the better deal. "Senator," Volkov said smoothly, approaching with me on his arm, "thank you for your work on the Port Security Committee. Your dedication to keeping our city safe is admirable." Morrison's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. I go wherever beauty and culture intersect." Volkov's hand tightened on my waist. "May I introduce Maya Volkov, no relation, though I'm trying to convince her otherwise." The implication hung in the air, that I was his lover, his possession, his prize. My face heated, but I kept my expression neutral. Diane Morrison's eyes raked over me with barely concealed disdain. "How lovely. Another Russian import. Brooklyn, actually," I said quietly. "Born and raised. How authentic." She turned her attention back to Volkov, effectively dismissing me again. "We should talk about your contribution to the Children's Fund. Of course." "Maya, darling, why don't you explore the galleries? I'll find you shortly." He kissed my temple, a gesture of casual intimacy that made Diane's eyes narrow. I understood the dismissal for what it was, an opportunity to listen without him as a distraction. I drifted toward the sculpture gallery, champagne in hand, playing the part of the bored companion. Diane Morrison appeared beside me 5 minutes later, her smile sharp as broken glass. "So, how did you meet Alexei?" "At a restaurant. I was working. He was persistent." "I bet he was." She took a long sip of champagne. "Men like him always are. They see something they want, and they take it. Doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process." There was something bitter in her tone, something personal. "You know him well?" "Well enough to know he's dangerous." Her eyes found Volkov across the room, deep in conversation with her husband. "My husband thinks he can control men like Alexei. Thinks his committee and his investigations will somehow contain the wolves at the gates." She laughed, the sound brittle. "But wolves don't get contained. They just wait for the right moment to strike." "Your husband's investigation is going to get someone killed." She cut me off, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The port security bill isn't about safety. It's about control, about who gets to move what through this city. And there are people, powerful people, who don't want that control shifting." Her eyes met mine. "If you care about Alexei at all, tell him to be careful. The nets are closing." Before I could respond, a woman in red interrupted, pulling Diane away with air kisses and exclamations. I was left standing among marble statues of Greek gods, my mind racing. The nets are closing. I found Volkov 20 minutes later on a balcony overlooking the city, his silhouette dark against the glittering skyline. He didn't turn as I approached, but his posture shifted, acknowledging my presence. "Did you learn anything interesting?" he asked. I repeated Diane Morrison's warning verbatim, watching his shoulders tense with each word. "She's not wrong," he said finally. "Morrison's bill would require electronic tracking of all shipping containers entering the port. It would make certain business arrangements much more difficult. Illegal business arrangements." "Business is business, Maya. Legal and illegal are just words governments use to control commerce." He turned to face me, and in the moonlight, he looked almost vulnerable, almost human. Did she seem afraid? Resigned, like she knows something bad is coming and can't stop it. Because she does. Morrison has enemies beyond me. Enemies who aren't as civilized about removing obstacles. He moved closer, his hand cupping my face. "This is what you need to understand. I'm not the worst monster in this city. I'm just the most honest about what I am. That doesn't make it better. It makes it survivable." His thumb traced my lower lip. "You're doing well, Maya. Better than I expected. You listen, you remember, you don't panic. These are valuable skills." "I panic plenty. I just hide it well." "Good. Fear keeps you alive." He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. "I need to tell you something. Anton Dmitriev, Dmitri's son, has been making threats. Against me. against my businesses, against anyone associated with me. My blood ran cold. He knows about me? He saw us together at the gallery opening. He's young, angry, grieving, a dangerous combination. His hands moved to my shoulders, gripping firmly. Victor will be with you at all times now. No exceptions. And if you see Anton anywhere near you, you run. You call me immediately. You're frightened. The realization shocked me. You're actually worried. I'm cautious. There's a difference. But his grip tightened. Anton has nothing to lose, which makes him unpredictable. Unpredictable is more dangerous than powerful. We stood on the balcony as the gala continued inside, the sounds of laughter and music drifting through the open doors, and for the first time, I saw past the cold control to the man beneath, someone who'd lost a sister, who bore the weight of violence and empire, who looked at me and saw a ghost he couldn't save but might be able to protect. Why me? I whispered. Really? Why did you choose me? Because you were invisible. Because you survived losses that should have broken you. Because... He stopped, jaw tightening. Because I remind you of Katya. No. His hand slid down to capture my wrists. At first, maybe. But now you're just you, Maya. Stubborn, compassionate, stronger than you believe. And that terrifies me more than Anton's threats ever could. Why? Because I can't afford to care about you. Caring creates weakness. Weakness creates openings. And in my world, openings get people killed. But his hands on my wrists were gentle. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, held something warm and dangerous. Then let me go, I breathed. End this arrangement. Let me disappear. I can't. The admission seemed torn from him. I tried, these past few days. Tried to convince myself you were just a tool. Just another asset. But when I think about you in that shitty apartment with broken locks or walking home alone at night or... His voice cracked slightly. I can't let you go, Maya. Even if it's selfish. Even if it puts you in danger. You're a monster. Yes. You killed a man in cold blood. Yes. You're controlling my entire life. Yes. His forehead pressed against mine again. But I'm your monster now, and I protect what's mine. The kiss, when it came, wasn't gentle. It was claiming, possessive, tasting of champagne and desperation. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me in place as he devoured my mouth with an intensity that stole my breath. I should have pushed him away. Should have fought, resisted, maintained some dignity. Instead, I kissed him back, because he was right. I had stopped fighting the cage, because somewhere between the terror and the silk dresses and the diamond earrings, I'd started to see the man beneath the monster. The boy who'd lost his sister, the immigrant who'd clawed his way to power. The wolf who looked at me like I was the only real thing in a world of beautiful lies. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes held a mixture of triumph and regret. This changes things, he said. Everything already changed. The moment I understood you're Russian, the moment I got in your car. No. His thumb traced my swollen lips. This is different, more dangerous. Before I could respond, Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. Sir, we have a situation. Anton Dmitriev is in the building. Security saw him enter through the service entrance 5 minutes ago. Volkov's entire demeanor shifted, from vulnerable to lethal in a heartbeat. Get Maya to the car, now. Take the private exit. What about you? I'll handle Anton. He pulled a gun from somewhere inside his jacket. I hadn't even known he was armed, and checked it with practiced efficiency. Victor, if anything happens to her... It won't, sir. Volkov's hand cupped my face one last time. Listen to Victor. Don't be brave. Don't be curious. Just survive. Alexei, go. He pushed me toward Victor, his expression already closing off, the vulnerable man disappearing behind walls of cold control. I'll call you when it's safe. Victor's hand closed around my arm, firm but not painful, and he pulled me through a service corridor I hadn't known existed. Behind us, I heard shouts, the sound of breaking glass, a single gunshot that made my heart stop. Don't look back, Victor commanded, moving faster. Keep moving. We burst through a side exit into an alley where another car waited. Not the Mercedes, but something nondescript and dark. Victor shoved me into the back seat and climbed in beside me, barking orders at the driver in rapid Russian. The car peeled away from the curb, tires squealing on wet pavement. What happened? Is he okay? Victor, please. He's fine. He's always fine. But Victor's hand was white-knuckled on the door handle. Anton came alone, stupid, emotional. Exactly what Mr. Volkov expected. Did he... I couldn't finish the sentence. Kill him? Probably not, Mr. Volkov doesn't kill children, even armed ones seeking revenge. Victor's eyes met mine in the darkness. But he'll make sure Anton understands that threatening what belongs to him has consequences, what belongs to him. We drove in silence, the city lights blurring past, until we pulled up to my new building. Victor escorted me all the way to my door, checking the apartment thoroughly before nodding. Lock everything. Don't leave until you hear from Mr. Volkov. I'll be outside. He paused at the door. He cares about you, you know. More than is wise. More than he's cared about anyone since Katya. That doesn't make this okay. No. Victor agreed. But it makes it real. And in our world, real is rare enough to be valuable. He left, and I locked the door with shaking hands. Pushkin wound around my ankles, oblivious to the violence and danger swirling in the world outside our fortress of steel and glass. My phone buzzed at midnight. AV. It's handled. Anton is alive but understands the consequences of threatening what's mine. Get some rest. Tomorrow we talk about what happens next. Me. What happens next? The response took longer this time. You stop being an asset and become something more dangerous. My weakness. My vulnerability. Mine. I stared at those words until they blurred. Until I wasn't sure if they were a promise or a threat. Maybe they were both. 3 weeks passed in a blur of gallery openings, charity galas, and whispered conversations. I learned to move through Manhattan's elite circles like a ghost, collecting secrets and trading them for Alexei's protection. The arrangement became routine, almost comfortable, in the way cages become comfortable when lined with silk. But everything changed the night of the Russian Heritage Foundation dinner. Alexei had been tense all evening, his usual control frayed at the edges, his hand on my waist gripped tighter than necessary. His eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made even hardened criminals nervous. Something's wrong, I whispered as we moved through the crowd. Senator Morrison's investigation is accelerating. He has evidence of shipments I can't explain away. Evidence that could put me away for 20 years. His jaw tightened. I need to neutralize the threat. You mean kill him? I mean make him understand that pursuing this isn't in his best interests. He guided me toward the balcony, away from listening ears. But there's another option. One I don't want to pursue. What option? He was silent for a long moment, his hands gripping the balcony railing hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Marry me. The words hung in the air between us. Impossible and inevitable. What? Marry me. Legally, officially. Become untouchable under spousal privilege. You can't be forced to testify against your husband. Any information you gather, any conversations you overhear, protected. He turned to face me, and his eyes held something raw and desperate. It's purely practical. A legal shield, nothing more. That's insane. That's survival. His hands cupped my face. I'm running out of options, Maya. Morrison has me cornered. But if you're my wife, if everything you know is protected by law, you can't marry someone just to avoid prison. I'm not marrying you to avoid prison. His voice dropped. I'm marrying you because somewhere in the past month, you stopped being a tool and became necessary. Because I wake up thinking about your safety and go to sleep planning how to keep you close. Because... He stopped, jaw clenched. Because what? Because I love you, you stubborn, compassionate, infuriating woman. And love is the most dangerous weapon anyone could use against me. The confession shattered something in my chest. This monster who'd killed without remorse, who controlled lives like chess pieces, who'd trapped me in a cage of silk and diamonds. He loved me. And God help me. I loved him back. This is crazy, I whispered. Yes. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee black because you can't afford cream. I know you cry when you think no one's watching. I know you named your cat after your favorite poet, and you still sleep with your grandmother's rosary under your pillow, even though you stopped believing in God the day your daughter died. His thumbs traced my cheekbones. I know everything about you, Maya, and I want all of it. If I say yes, you'll be protected, provided for, mine in every way that matters. His forehead pressed against mine, but you'll also be a target, a weakness my enemies can exploit. I can't promise you safety, not complete safety, but I can promise you'll never face danger alone. I thought about my studio apartment with broken locks, about working 3 jobs and still drowning in debt, about the loneliness that had followed me since Lily died, the emptiness that nothing could fill. And I thought about Alexei, brutal and honest, monstrous and vulnerable, looking at me like I was the only thing keeping him human. Okay. His eyes widened fractionally. Okay? Marry me, Alexei Volkov. Make me your wife, your weakness, your vulnerability. Make me yours. The kiss was different this time, softer, deeper, tasting of promises we'd both probably break but would die trying to keep. His arms wrapped around me, holding me like I might disappear, and I realized this was what safety felt like. Not the absence of danger, but having someone who'd stand between you and the wolves. Tomorrow, he said against my lips. We'll do it tomorrow. Quick, legal, before Morrison can move. Tomorrow, I agreed. We married at City Hall on a Tuesday morning, with Victor and Mikhail as witnesses. I wore a simple cream dress Alexei had delivered that morning. He wore his usual immaculate suit. The ceremony took 7 minutes. When the clerk pronounced us husband and wife, Alexei slid a platinum band onto my finger. No diamond, just a simple ring engraved with Russian words. Moya Sudba, my destiny. It was Katya's. He said quietly, she'd want you to have it. I kissed him in front of the bureaucrat and the security guards and the other couples waiting their turn. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than numb. Morrison's investigation collapsed 2 weeks later. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses recanted. The senator announced his retirement due to health concerns, and Diane Morrison filed for divorce. Anton Dmitriev left the country, relocated to Prague with a generous settlement that would cover his medical school education. Alexei never told me what he'd said to make the boy abandon his vendetta, but I didn't ask. Some cages, I was learning, were built from mercy as much as control. 6 months later, I stood in our penthouse, not his, ours, watching the sun set over Manhattan. My hand rested on my still flat stomach, on the impossible miracle growing inside me. The doctor had said it was unlikely I'd ever conceive again after Lily. But unlikely wasn't impossible. Alexei's arms wrapped around me from behind, his hand covering mine on my belly. Scared? He murmured against my ear, terrified. Good. That means you understand what's at stake. His hand tightened. I won't let anything happen to you, or to our child. I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. He turned me to face him, those winter gray eyes holding mine. I'm a monster, Maya. I've done unforgivable things. But I protect what's mine. And you... His hand moved to cut my face. You're everything. I rose on my toes and kissed my husband, my monster, my salvation and damnation wrapped in expensive suits and lethal competence. Outside, the city glittered with 1,000,000 lives, 1,000,000 stories, 1,000,000 cages people built and called freedom. But here, in Alexei's arms, I'd found something more dangerous than freedom. Belonging. And if that made me complicit in his sins, if that made me a monster too, then so be it. Some cages are worth keeping, some monsters are worth loving, and some surrenders feel like victory.